Good morning, everyone. John Ensz here from the Inman Museum with another video for you of an exhibit here. This one on Dr. Graves, Inman's original horse and buggy doctor. Dr. John S. Graves actually came to Inman before it existed. He stayed for a while at the Eakins farm before this town was even built, and when the town was finally put together in 1887, he came on horseback with all of the medical tools that he owned in the saddlebags with him. So really his time of being a physician here in Inman, it did start in 1887. Of course, the town was still named Aiken at that time. It was later changed to Inman. Dr. Graves was a huge supporter of the town of Inman, and it's said that the town is the way it is today largely because of his involvement in helping the town grow and so forth. The descendants of Dr. Graves have been very gracious to the museum and have donated a lot of his personal effects and so forth, and we'll take a brief look at some of those today. I also want to say that there were other physicians in Inman other than Dr. Graves. We're mostly just going to talk about Dr. Graves today, though, but Dr. Ensz was here, Dr. Blake, Dr. Johnson were some of the well-known physicians in the old days. Dr. Graves unfortunately died rather young. He died in 1915 following an infection from a gallbladder operation that he had, and it was a great loss to the town of Inman. In this display case that you see in front of you are a variety of things from Dr. Graves' practice, as well as some other medical artifacts that have been donated by other people. Dr. Graves built a home on this northeast corner of Locust and Center Street here in Inman. Here's a picture of that home and the barn. That home is still standing. It's one of the more beautiful homes in Inman. And you can see it if you drive by on Center Street. It's a private home today. Dr. Graves was also famous for his livestock and poultry. This is a collection of ribbons he got in the year 1915 alone for ribbons he won for the chickens he raised. That was the year that he died. Over here we see a picture of him as a young man with his family, a wedding picture of Dr. Graves, and then this portrait here. Dr. Graves spent a lot of his time on horse and buggy going around Inman in about a 10-mile radius, taking care of the sick and the dying. Sometimes he would be gone 7 days at a time, just on a circuitous route in his buggy, which was often driven by his son Brooks. Brooks we see here in this picture in his band uniform, along with his little brother Charles and Brooks Graves. The Graveses had 4 children. They had a daughter, Emma Bell, and the sons Brooks, Charles, and then a son Dwight as well. One of the interesting things in this exhibit, you can see here Brooks and Charles on their lapels. They have a medallion as well as a little flask for oil for their musical instruments, and right next to it is that medallion and flask that you can see here that was graciously donated by the Graves family. We do have one of the textbooks that Dr. Graves used in his medical school studies, a book on chemistry, as well as his graduation portrait from the medical college in Keokuk, Illinois, when he graduated there. That was in the year 1885. Recipe book, stomach bitters, beautiful handwriting, drops of each chemical that goes into it. Before the days of drugstores and pharmacies. Over here we have an interesting, a photo of this was on the Facebook page several months ago. This is Dr. Graves' sister. Her name was Sally, and it is a wreath and a watch fob made out of her hair. She died when she was 26. In the Victorian customs, when people were dying, it was not unusual to collect their hair and to make these mementos for them. Was framed upside down, though. Usually the hair wreath, the opening indicates that the person's life has been cut short, and the opening would be facing upward to indicate that they had ascended into heaven. This one was, I think, framed to match the picture, and it was not framed as it would have been in the old days. In the case, instruments that Dr. Graves used, as well as other instruments from other people. Over here we see a set of scalpels, an Alice clamp, a straight and a curved Mayo scissors, and different syringes and items that Dr. Graves would have used during his practice. Medicine cups where the different medicines were mixed and prepared for patients. Dr. Graves did have an office here in town. It was above the drugstore at first, and you had to climb stairs to get it. He was very excited about the railroad coming to town, and once the Rock Island Railroad, had extended all the way to Medora, which is between here and Hutchinson, he also provided medical care for the people in Medora. If somebody in Medora was sick, a telegram would be sent to the train station here at Inman, and a hand car would be dispatched to Medora. The sick person located on the car, and the car brought back to Inman, the hand car brought back to Inman with a sick person on it so Dr. Graves could treat them. Other times he would go by buggy. In this part of the exhibit, we have a few of the items from different doctors' offices, including Dr. Graves' office, that have been donated here into the museum. In the corner is an old wheelchair from 1903. It actually was used later on in the first home for the aged in Inman as well. And different medications, different things that he would use to treat sick people. Not all of these items are from Dr. Graves' office, but many of them are, including here on the wall, the doorbell that people would use at his home to seek entrance if they needed to see the doctor for any reason. Still works. Even have the vacuum cleaner. Actually, it was not a vacuum, a sweeper that was used in his office as well. One of the things exhibited here, as you can see, these prostheses. These actually belong to a gentleman by the name of Henry Nickel. He was going to Burton during the winter on a wagon, and it got very, very cold, and he got frostbite. Both of his lower extremities ended up getting gangrenous and having to be amputated. And he wore those prostheses. Most of the time he spent in a wheelchair. This is a picture of Henry Nickel here. Dr. Graves did do, like most frontier doctors, amputations, often serious breaks or injuries in limbs. The only way to salvage them was to amputate them. So a lot of interesting things here. One other thing I want to point out, this black object that you see here in the case, this was actually an early hearing aid. You would put the small end in your ear, and the large end would catch whatever was being said. My mother actually remembers an elderly gentleman in the church she grew up in Hillsborough, Kansas, using one of those in church. Would love for you to come to the museum and look in more depth into the different items here in the medical exhibit at the museum, as well as learn about some of the other physicians and early health care in Inman, Kansas. Thanks a lot for watching. Everybody have a great weekend.